Hello everyone, welcome back to IntelliGuru. Today we're gonna see one most of the important and frequently asked Spring Boot interview question. When should we use @bean instead of @component in Spring Boot? Most developers know both annotations. Most developers have used both annotations, but very few developers actually understand why does @bean exist? Why can't we use @component everywhere? What does configuration do internally, and why is configuration annotation so important? By the end of this video, you will understand all of these concepts with real world examples and internal working. So let's start with a simple class. If you see, I have one class as payment service, and @service annotation is given here. Spring Boot automatically creates a bean for this class. Why? Because Spring performs something called component scanning. And if you go to this service annotation class, you will see here this service annotation also have @component annotation. So internally, all the annotations, component, service, repository, it has component annotations. So during application startup, Spring scans your project and looks for annotations such as component, service, repository, or controller. Whenever Spring finds these annotations, it automatically creates beans and stores them inside the Spring IOC container. So let's say we are writing our one of the service like this. We have given annotation @component this time. What happens internally? Spring Boot starts, it scans the package, it finds this class, it creates an object and stores that object inside the Spring IOC container. Very simple, right? So we can think of component as telling Spring, hey Spring, please create a bean from this class. What are the limitations of using component? So now let's look at a real world problem. Suppose I want Spring to manage ObjectMapper or RestTemplate or Mongo client. These classes belong to external libraries. I didn't write them. Now tell me, can I open ObjectMapper source code and add something like this? I mean, can I add component annotation to ObjectMapper? Of course not, because it belongs to somebody else. And now we have a problem. Spring can only scan classes that contains component annotation. But external libraries don't contain component annotation or our annotations. So how do we create beans for third party classes? This is exactly why @bean annotation exists. So let's create a configuration class. Now notice in this class something very interesting. Spring is no longer scanning ObjectMapper. Instead, Spring finds @bean annotation and execute this method. And whatever object get written from this method, it becomes a Spring bean. So in this way, flow becomes like Spring starts, it finds configuration annotation to the class, then it will look for @bean method, it will execute that method, and whatever object is being written from this method, based on that, it will create the bean for that. So this is most important difference. With @component, Spring creates bean from class, but with @bean annotation, Spring creates a bean from the object written by a method. I'll repeat that because it's extremely important. For component annotation, Spring creates a bean from a class, while for bean annotation, Spring creates a bean from the object written by a method. So one of the most common example is RestTemplate. If you see, I have created one app config class, added configuration annotation, and then I have created one method, RestTemplate. Here I have added bean annotation to this method. Now Spring manages RestTemplate, which means anywhere in our application, then we can use this RestTemplate. So if we go to example test class, if you see here, I am using this RestTemplate over here, and Spring will inject it automatically. This is exactly how many real world application configures RestTemplate, ObjectMapper, Mongo clients, Kafka clients, or AWS SDK clients. Now let's go a little bit deeper. Most developers stop here. But let's understand why @configuration exists. Suppose we write one config class like this. So we have two bean, one is engine, one is car. So the question here is, how many engine objects should exist? Answer is only one, because Spring Beans are singleton by default. That's correct, right? Now look carefully inside car bean. We are calling engine directly. Normally in Java, every method call would create a new object, but Spring does something clever. So when Spring finds @configuration annotation, it creates a special proxy using code generation library. And this proxy intercepts method calls. So when engine gets called, Spring checks, do I already have an engine bean? If yes, it returns the existing bean instead of creating a new object. So how configuration works internally? The moment Spring see @configuration annotation, it creates proxy through code generation library, and then it intercepts that method call. After that, it will check whether bean is present in the container or not. If it is present, it creates the existing bean. And this is how Spring guarantees singleton behavior for bean method. Now the important question is, when should we use @component and when should we use @bean? So use component like component, service, repository, controller when you own the class, or Spring can scan the class, or no custom creation logic is required. And for bean, when a class belongs to a third party libraries, or when you need custom object creation, or you want full control over bean initialization. For examples, ObjectMapper, RestTemplate, Mongo client, Kafka template, or AWS SDK clients. Now let's quickly summarize whatever we have learned so far. When annotation is @component, Spring creates bean from class. When annotation is @bean, Spring creates a bean from method returned value. @configuration internally creates a code generation library proxy, where code generation library proxy maintains singleton behavior. So next time, if someone asks, when should we use @bean instead of @component, you can confidently say, use @component when Spring can scan the class, and use @bean when Spring cannot scan the class, or when custom object creation is required. If this video helped you understand @bean, @component, and @configuration internally, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with other developers. See you in the next Spring Boot interview question.